do 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 do. Hello, greetings. How are you doing this evening? Many years ago, I discovered what magnetism truly is. I always laugh when people say, "You weren't the first to discover what magnetism is. So and so did." It's like, can you quote me where they ever actually defined magnetism? I've asked that hundreds of times, and they never could, because none of them ever did. First it was magnetism, and then it was field unification. I conquered both of those. One last thing, and the only thing that actually made me upset, not upset, literally, at myself, was how simple it is. You know, no one ever stops to say the blatantly obvious, and that is, if it's not divinely simple, and simplicity is divinity, a motto I came up with. If it's not divinely simple, it can't be true of nature. It's completely impossible. It breaks Occam's razor. It breaks the principle of natura naturans in nature. And here we have, and I have the link below in the description. A lot of people aren't aware of the description of a video, the link to this article. I had to pare it down by nearly 10 pages. And it's currently at 23 pages. About 75% of the diagrams are new. And I know people would need a lot of diagrams to be able to visualize it. A lot of the lexicon people are not familiar with. And by the way, any donation is always warmly welcome. I actually have donation links on the article here. Even if it's only $1, it's actually greatly appreciated. I lead a simple life, believe it or not. So let's go over energy unification, and please download the article. It's free, but a donation is suggested, but certainly no one is obligated to donate anything. But I would certainly greatly appreciate it. What if in unification of electricity, and by the way, electricity, I've already explained that this is not part of energy unification. However, of course, electricity is included. We're actually interested in unifying EMR, or light, and matter, and something that should be called a dielectric sink, or black hole. And these all follow a simplex geometry. However, looked individually, they appear to be different geometries. But I explain it and give many countless diagrams in this article and how they're unified. Electricity, of course, is the oscillation between the inductance and capacitance, or in short, the conjugate energy circuit of the magnetic and the dielectric, and what we call the electric field, or electricity. This is, of course, the diagram I've shown countless times before. This is from Electrical Discharges, Waves, and Impulses, published in 1917 by Charles Proteus Steinmetz, and right next to it you can actually see the view underneath the supercell. And I talked about the conjugate geometry between the magnetodielectric, but what's new about that? And that part is not new. But the first 4 pages roughly go over this simplex unification of fields before actually migrating on to light. And by the way, I've said several multiplicatives above that of gamma radiation. We actually have many multiplicatives above that. Here we go from like 1.65 eV of near infrared to 3.27 of ultraviolet. And then, of course, we go to X-ray and gamma radiation. And of course, I've shown this before as the simplex modality of conceptualization, which human beings are greatly fond of and greatly guilty of, giving different concepts to one and the same thing. You know, a wave phenomena. And of course, I tell everybody, you know, waves of what? And the particle that's called the photon. It's an abstraction. It'd be like saying ice is a different modality of water. Of course, it's just a temperature modality. Here we actually have it. And you could follow this. I think this is on page 6 or so of the article. We have infrared 165, gamma radiation, actually right about here, and the energy rating of hydrogen is somewhere around 13.6 eV as the median. And then, of course, all atoms are compounded hydrogen, and above that, we actually have a counterspatial sink that human beings are fond to call a black hole. Here we actually have higher capacitance, leading to smaller spatial volume. The same is true of all EMR, or electromagnetic radiation. We have light which is coaxial, and I actually explained that in the article, to where matter is a spherical frequency, but it is not propagating frequency. Light, of course, is not an emission, as I've said countless times. It's not a wave, a particle, wave-particle duality, an emission, nor does it have a speed, nor is there any such thing as a photon. These are all misunderstandings of the nature of light. Too inertial. So we go coaxial, spherical, inertial. And I try to keep it as simple as possible with as many visual diagrams as would be needed for people to see the unified nature of all energy. The geometry, of course, in reality never changes, but only seemingly so, due to the capacitance of the energy circuit, whether that be EMR or matter, gamma radiation, radio, X-ray, visible EMR, i.e. the lower frequencies of light and infrared and radio, so on and so forth. So we actually have two different geometries which are actually one unified geometry between coaxial, spherical, and inertial. Once again, the power range from IR at 1.65 to ultraviolet at 3.27 increases. So we actually have an EMR, a coaxial torsion ether circuit, and I could show you the diagrams here. All I have to do is rotate the torus nearly 90 degrees and actually show you the circuit of light actually as it follows the rarefaction, compression, and transverse manifestation, demanifestation, or literally the expanding three-dimensional force vector that makes up the toroidal of the EM circuit of light. And of course I go down here, actually a little bit above here, and show you the coaxial circuit and defining. Most people don't know what a coax is. I show you the diagram of a coax, and I make it with the diagrams and the explanations readily understandable. Human beings, of course, ignorantly assign names and attributional states such as water, ice, and steam, all of which are merely water. The concept of the idea of the photon has no basis in nature. Such nonsense term, of course, is applied to the geometric modality of light, or EMR, i.e. rarefactions, i.e. EM, and compressions, i.e. the drop and the disturbance analogy. Here we actually take the hyperboloid and turn it on its edge. We actually extrapolate out the three-dimensional force vector of the transverse electromagnetic, and we only need to apply one more vector of rarefaction and compression along the dielectric. So we actually have a transverse pinch rarefaction, which is one unified whole. The unified whole of the coaxial circuit of light is this magnetodielectric hyperboloid, and the energy perturbation, which they could use the word propagation conventionally, but nothing's propagating as far as moving. As Nikola Tesla said, light can be nothing other than a sound wave in the ether. And of course, sound is not an emission, it's a disturbance of the air. Of course, necessitatively, I must explain geomagnetic precession, which I do, and that is actually taken from field definition, but I included that for other people that wanted to keep everything within it for the explanation of light and matter. Here I actually have the formula for the fundamental matter, or hydrogen. That was my discovery of November of last year. And then on to the black hole, or to the dielectric sink. So from light to gamma to ultra high energy light at 13.6 eV, i.e. fundamental hydrogen. Lastly, ultra high mass dielectric sink that we conventionally call, unfortunately, a black hole. It's not a hole, and the only reason why they call it black is because it has no magnitude. It's a supermass with no magnitude. For example, like the most diamagnetic element in the universe, bismuth, of course, is the most dielectric in capacitance. When it's actually molten, it'll actually substantially and shockingly, and I've done this many times myself, shrink in volume. Something that's super diamagnetic, which bismuth is the most diamagnetic element, means it is the most dielectric element, i.e. dielectric capacitance. And dielectric capacitance is always a move towards counter space, but in its solid frozen state, not that it's frozen, in a room temperature state, it is of certain volume, but when you're able to liquefy it and let it move according to its field geometry and dielectric capacitance, man, it shrinks drastically. It's kind of shocking. It's like, did I spill some of it somewhere? It's like, oh no, it's molten and it shrunk significantly. It's kind of fascinating to see that. You should try it yourself. It's not too very dangerous to melt bismuth, but that's just one simplex analogy. Anyway, the divine simplicity of all energy circuits follows this conjugate geometry of fields perfectly and with perfect simplicity. Capacitance, of course, is anti-spatial or counterspatial, and force, i.e. the toroidal geometry, is spatially directed. It gives some simplex analogies of a counterspatial sink. Some of the newer diagrams that are in here that I think explain things rather brilliantly, talking about it doesn't matter which way you turn it. On the Charles Proteus Steinmetz diagram, you're actually able to see the toroidal geometry of the magnet and the counterspatial geometry of increasing inertia and acceleration. I have in here somewhere I remember Eric Dollard actually made a statement to the effect of, he said that one is the antinomy of the other, but they're not. I mean, ice is not the antinomy of water. It's like one is the inverse of the other, I think he uses, and I actually give the quote in here. Can't remember the specific one. I'd have to go through the entire article. I know I stuck it somewhere up here in the top. But that's only super slightly accurate. It's not the antinomy or the negative of the other. They're the conjugate relationship of the entire universe. And everything from dielectricity to magnetism, all forms of energy modality, specifically in unification of energy, of EMR, i.e. light, matter, electricity. However, I did not, even though I defined electricity fully here, with several paragraphs and diagrams, but of a dielectric sink, EMR, and matter are all unified. They're all one simplex geometry. They only appear superficially so in their circuit forms to be different geometries, even though they're not, due to the nature of dielectric capacitance and how the geometry manifests. In the case of light, we're talking about a circular frequency with no transverse component. It's actually reached the hysteresis boundary at which propagation no longer occurs. All fields are just ether perturbation modalities, and energy, of course, are modalities of that expression. But how did you unify them? I mean, I already explained magnetism fully. However, I still have another 5 gigabytes of material to add to my fourth edition on the book on magnetism, and unfortunately I work 7 days a week, so it's slower in coming on that than I certainly would have liked, but I have the materials. All I need to do is put it together. It's kind of daunting, unfortunately, when you look at 5 gigabytes of material for the fourth edition. But, I explained magnetism fully, I explained fields, but then how do you unify? And I have to admit that I didn't dedicate an enormous amount of mental energy towards that, even though I knew I had it. And then thinking about it for the significant allergies, it's springtime. Sorry about that. I have slight allergies here because everything is in bloom. Even my truck was just covered in this foam of pollen. It's like somebody sprinkled baby powder all over my truck. It's allergies from all the pollen that's out there. Unification of this blinked to me in less than a microsecond, and I saw it all perfectly clearly with absolute ease, and it's just brilliant. Then an instant right after that, I get slightly mad at myself, not literally, but kind of, not seeing it before. I mean, I did see it in a certain way, but it wasn't a clarity of singular vision that had no words or thoughts or concepts behind it, but it was just absolute clarity as an attribute of wisdom, which is atemporal. It's just instant. It's like you don't need to think about your love for your sister or your child or your wife. It's instantaneous, and it requires no words and no thoughts. It's kind of like that. It's just, it is atemporal, and it is also, too, not an aspect of thought or conscious machination, and that's what I'm incredibly proud of in discovering this. And I really did add a lot of diagrams, about 70% of which are original here, to let you see the nature of the simplicity of it. I forget the exact quote from Dollard. Anyway, he kept saying that one was the antithesis of the other, and that's not the case. Ice isn't the antithesis of water. I'm not picking on Dollard, for example. I was just singling out, one of the things that he said. Why do you think gamma radiation is so dangerous, for example? Gamma radiation, of course, is incredibly close. Gamma radiation is right over here. This is an inaccurate representation. It should actually not only be closer together, the frequency, but the wavelength should be infinitely less. Gamma radiation is infinitely, as a spatial footprint, infinitely less than radio or microwaves or infrared or visible light. But why is it so dangerous? I mean, it acts like quasi-matter. This is the reason why these quantum folks think that, well, light is a wave-particle duality. You know, sometimes it acts like a wave of what? Sometimes it acts like a particle. They actually don't understand the compound circuit that is light. But with the increase of the compound circuit of light, gamma is so dangerous because it literally acts like matter is passing through you, even though it's EMR. Its capacitance is incredibly high. It breaks apart your DNA, and it causes extreme tissue damage. It's like, why is gamma so... There's not a single professor or PhD on this earth that can tell you, yeah, excuse me, gamma is just super high energy EMR. Yeah, that's true, yeah. It's a super high energy light. It's not visible to human beings' eyes, for example, which is just part of the visible spectrum right here. But why is it so damaging? It's just light. They can't actually give you an answer. They say, well, it has an EV quotient of 10 to the 13th. No, that's descriptive. That's not explicative. I could tell it so even a 5-year-old could understand it. Its capacitance is so high and its spatial volume so small, it acts like matter. And several magnitudes above that, at 13.6 eV, we actually have it. We have the hydrogen atom. And I explain in here, without going into all the little details, you could read it for yourself, why actually we move on to the next geometry of this. This is a really great one. I think people would really like this and several of the other diagrams I included into here. Scroll down to the spherical capacitance threshold that we call matter and hydrogen. And of course all atoms are just compound hydrogen. I wanted to keep this really simple. There's a reason why I took it about 10 pages of extemporaneous logomachy. There's another great word for you, logomachy. To keep it really simple and explaining, you know, the energy geometry of matter. And it no longer propagates a spherical frequency. It has its own frequency of its system, but it is not a propagating frequency because it's reached ether hysteresis and such that it's not propagating EMR, coaxial light circuit. It has a spherical frequency now in and of itself. And then, of course, we move on to what's right after that, which is the dielectric sink or the black hole. And the unification of all these is absolutely divinely simple. So you have a magnetic toroidal dielectric hyperboloid in the case of matter hydrogen, spherical frequency and maximum capacitance of light, no propagating frequency, but the barrier threshold or ether elasticity, and this rate of induction threshold, once reached, is as meant the ether hysteresis threshold at which propagation no longer occurs. Explaining light becomes really simple. Also, too, explaining galactic jets, as we have right here. We actually have pictures of galactic jets. Okay, I know these are computer generated, but we actually have many pictures of galactic jets. Here you see the magnetodielectric hyperboloid. You can actually have a magnetosphere right around here. This is the plane of inertia. This is the hyperboloid and the galactic jets emitting out trillions and trillions of trillions of tons of super high energy light. A super high energy light, of course, is the threshold, which there is no longer a propagation after which, and then you have the manifestation of hydrogen. So ask yourself, why do these dielectric sinks or black holes emitting out trillions and trillions of tons of hydrogen? And in explaining that, and I give you the geometry, let me zoom out here, in the 23-page article, not that one, that's an old diagram, but right above here, there, and down through here. I think I kept things really simple. Energy unification is absolutely beautiful. You have a singular geometry between the magnetodielectric hyperboloid, the plane of inertia, and of course the increase in the geometry of the dielectric sink occurs at the plane of inertia. Objective empirical observations from deep space fields shows this to be the case. And actually explaining out the geometries of galaxies becomes divinely simple. And if you understand this magnetodielectric hyperboloid and the plane of inertia, right here, the torsion plane, that's the only axis at which it could expand between the hyperboloid and the torus of the magnetodielectric, where you have a supermass but no magnitude. You have an increasing torsional plane along the plane of the dielectric of this counterspatial sink. Amazingly enough, we have come hither and gone thither, where we have the supermass with no magnitude of the dielectric sink, but of its own geometry, all of a sudden, it becomes its own birthplace for the generation of more matter. It's the perfect system of energy conservation, where we actually have matter vanishing in counter space, and I know counter space is a somewhat ridiculous word, but also giving rise to more and more matter. So from thence it comes and to whence it goes, you know, in perfect equilibrium. It really is the simplicity and divinity of nature itself. Anyway, all of these follow one simplex geometry. And the only reason the geometry apparently, but ultimately is not changed, but apparently is changed, is due to the capacitance of the system, from EMR all the way from radio to gamma and then to matter, the energy threshold of ether itself. And I explain all this in the article. Of course, I can't sit here and read the whole article during this video. I'd bore everybody to death. It's like, why not just download the article? Anyway, it's 23 pages. It's below. It's a free download, and also to the description. And once again, any donation is always kindly welcome. But the article, just like every article that I write and every book that I write, is completely free. I hope you appreciate it. If anybody dare protest this, I have no problem, but they will never have any evidence against it because it is irrefutable. My mind is always open to facts, logic, and wisdom. But the simplicity of this is irreproachable. I'm not saying nobody dare reproach this article. They could phrase it in a slightly different way, maybe with here or there slightly better clarity. People might not like the lexicons or words that I use, but I mean, it's simple English, even if they're not words you use on a daily basis, obviously so, and talking about, you know, compound field lexicon definitions or whatnot, but I'm not trying to complicate things. The reason why I added so many diagrams. But if it's not absolutely simple with sublime simplicity, it can't be natural. Nature is not complicated. It's that human beings are that myopic, are that unclear as to things. So I hope I made you happy with this article. Most of the diagrams are new, and I think I've explained it. You know, a lot of the time was spent on the diagrams. Writing this out was like, just like water. It just flowed just like water for me. It's the reason why I retracted about right at about 9 pages, nearly 10 pages of materials. Like, you know, this is a little overboard. You don't need that to get it across. Just add a diagram. Okay. I made a little debate with myself there to keep things simple. Because people are always saying, keep it simple! I don't get it! So the link is below in the description. Also, to pin a comment. I hope you like this video, and I hope you like the article, and I hope you have a lovely week. Thank you so much. Once again, I'm stunned by nature, and only slightly upset that I didn't make this article years ago, because the obvious nature of what it is and how it is without reproach. Thank you so much. Goodbye.